Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer 3 speculation video. Today we'll be talking about one of the most important aspects of Total War Warhammer, an aspect which is in most dire need of a complete overhaul. These are the siege battles. So without further ado, let's begin. Total War Warhammer 3 has been in development for quite some time now, and it would make sense for a huge overhaul regarding siege mechanics to come out on the third game. They did try to fix up the sieges in Total War Warhammer 2, especially when the Empire update came out. The implementation of the forts did work out quite well, but even then it was still pretty much a reskin of the High Elf Gate system. That being said, it makes more sense for an update to come out on the third game and not on the second, where the second game's lifespan is already close to its end. But let's stop looking at faults. So far the Total War Warhammer series is absolutely amazing, so let's see on how they could implement changes to the siege system and make it a lot better. First off, and the most obvious matter, is more siege maps and map variety. Right now, most of the maps pretty much are the same, they're just reskinned from each other. Currently, sieges offer no tactical difference, as pretty much all the maps are either straight lines or a small corner into the map. That's it really, no castles in the middle of the map, nothing too extravagant, especially for capital cities, no choke points barring very small ones inside the actual castles. And while in truth we do have a great amount of massively talented modders that can make just absolutely stunning maps, I don't believe that we should be relying on modders to actually create more visuals for us. Yes, some of those modders are absolutely amazing, but look at it this way. It's a base game, we should be getting at least a little bit of more stuff for it. The Warhammer Fantasy universe is absolutely huge, there are many illustrations of castles, fortresses and so on. So it's not like the source material does not exist. We can see a huge castle for Altdorf, a multiple layered city for Kislev and so on. I feel like more city variety in both bigger and smaller scale would absolutely be amazing, and it would propel the game to be even greater than it already is right now. With that, we've talked about the visual aspects, but now let's look towards possible mechanics for both attackers and defenders in siege battles. While it might be easier to go back to previous Total War games and actually implement mechanics from there, we do actually have an official Warhammer source for mechanics in siege battles. This is a book known as Blood in the Badlands, which actually details a lot of stuff to do with siege battles for both attackers and defenders, even giving some special racial mechanics for different races. Unfortunately, not all the races in 8th edition were actually covered in this book, but then again, it is quite interesting, and we're going to go over them now and see if they can actually fit in Total War Warhammer. Say in a hypothetical, you've been caught in the middle of a siege, whether as an attacker or a defender. In the case of the attackers, you're already allowed to build battering rams and siege towers, and in the case of the defenders, the only options you have are either to wait and potentially get sieged or lose a lot of troops in terms of attrition damage, or sally forth and meet your enemy in open field. But what if more mechanics were added for both attackers and defenders? First, we'll look towards the mechanics for the attackers, where two are already implemented into the game. That of the siege tower and the battering ram. Very basic, we've already got them, so there's no need to actually go through them. Next is an Empire-specific mechanic where if you have a steam tank in your army, you could upgrade it to have a battering ram, essentially removing the need of a normal battering ram and using your very powerful steam tank to knock down gates. Yes, I'm aware that you can already knock down a gate with your steam tank, but this would be a visual upgrade and it would actually remove the need of a normal battering ram. This would be able to do more damage to a gate than normal and actually get it down a lot quicker. Next are the monstrous battering clubs that you can give to your big monsters such as giants and so on. While you could use this to knock down gates, you could also use this to actually have your monstrous creatures start knocking down sections of the wall that may be undefended. Next we have siege ammunition, which essentially just buffs up siege weapons just to do more damage against wall sections. It might not seem like much, but a few extra % wall damage does help out, especially when you're trying to get in through the side. Here's one I find rather interesting, Hasty Assault, which basically means that you can attack straight off the bat. While you can already do this if you have a unit with a siege attacker trait or a monstrous unit, I'd actually like to see this implemented. There are many cases where I've just wanted to go into a siege, place ladders, or break through the gate and just go straight for it, rather than have to wait an extra turn and build up a siege tower or a battering ram, which I might not even use. Next are undermines, which do damage to walls before you actually get into the siege battle itself. Now you can already technically do this by using agents to break the wall down and so on, however there's a bit of an issue there. Once you're actually laying siege, you can't use your agents to damage walls and so on, which I think is a bit weird. I mean, it only makes sense if you're laying siege that you would still send your agents to actually do some damage to the walls and make it easier for you to get in. But with that we move towards a vampire count specific mechanic, the Restless Dead. So in the tabletop, the defending player would have to do something called a starvation roll before the battle would begin. This is very similar to Total War Warhammer's attrition damage, but it played to the benefit of the vampire counts. The more units that died, the more rolls had to be done, and on the roll of a 6, a fresh unit of spirit hosts would be summoned into the map and can be placed anywhere, including inside the castle. Unfortunately, at the time of recording this video, we still do not have spirit hosts. However, it could be done in a different way. Say for example that the more damage the defending player takes, the more of the likely chance that zombies and skeletons will rise up inside of the castle. Zombies and skeletons are weak tier 1 units, so they wouldn't be that powerful, and they could actually just prove to be a nuisance more than anything. And lastly, now we have a Skaven mechanic. This is the Warp Doom Magma Cannon. Essentially, it's a very tricked out warp lightning cannon, which is good for destroying walls, gates, and, well, being a lightning cannon. Just massive. This should be the ultimate gamble. This cannon should be able to destroy a wall in pretty much 1 or 2 shots, and while that might be very overpowered, it should also have the chance of blowing itself up and destroying everything in a large blast radius, maybe for example the size of one of Ickett's nukes. Anything that you have around that area would, well, evaporate. I would love to see this implemented, mainly because I'm a Skaven player and I love the randomness. It's great to see it do its damage, but it's also kind of funny just to see it blow up. But with that, we've looked over all the possible attacking mechanics, and now we can look towards the defenders. We're going to get one out of the way very quickly and then work our way down the list. First we have Sally Forth, which in the tabletop would be used to destroy enemy siege weaponry, whereas in Total War Warhammer it can be really explained as going to charge out and meet your enemy in the open field. So I don't think this one would be reworked in any other way. I think it's actually fine as it is. Also, just a quick note, there are a few upgrades here that are only specific for either Forces of Destruction or Forces of Order. In terms of Forces of Order, these would be Dwarves, High Elves, Empire, Bretonnia, and so on, where Forces of Destruction would be Orcs, Skaven, Dark Elves, and so on. But moving on, first we have the Haunted Mansion, which is a tower upgrade for the Forces of Destruction. Essentially, units in this tower would be given the Fear trait, and it will also do damage to enemies. Now, given the fact that towers already do damage to enemies, we don't really need an extra boost of damage. However, what I could see this as any defenders from the Forces of Destruction that are in the small capture area of the tower could be given the Fear trait, which would be rather interesting from a defender's point of view. You'd be basically demolishing your enemy's leadership as you're fighting them when they climb up the towers or through the siege tower. Next is the Witch's Cauldron, which was pretty random. Any units near it would roll a dice and they would either get buffed up or take damage. Honestly, I don't see this being implemented. It's kind of a bit too random for Creative Assembly. But you never know, it could actually be quite interesting. You could either take damage or make your units unbreakable or something. The third spot would be the Dwarf Brewhouse. This is a tower upgrade only available to the Forces of Order. Essentially, all it does is cast Regrowth as it was a wizard. However, it could be seen as a bound spell and just be able to cast it. This one's actually quite a fun one because you could resupply your forces whilst you're taking damage. It's another way to get some Law of Life spells whilst you're defending yourself against a big and terrifying army. Sometimes every little bit helps. But next we're going to move on to Flaming Ammunition, where you could upgrade one unit to actually have Flaming Ammunition. Now, we already have units with Flaming Ammunition, so I don't see this being implemented, but it would be rather interesting to give yourself a random unit with flaming attacks. But we're going to move on to something rather iconic that has been seen in many siege-based games, the Cauldron of Burning Oil. Yeah, it's very standard, you guys know what it does. It's on the edge of a wall, when the enemies get too close, boiling oil is poured on them. Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? And how many times do you see your walls being swarmed by enemies? This would be the perfect time to actually unleash boiling oil on them. Now we look towards the Warded Tower, which basically gives it magic resistance. Honestly, this is not going to get implemented. As far as I'm aware, you can't really use too many spells to actually damage towers, or I think you can't whatsoever, so yeah, there's no point. But let's move on. Now we look towards the Hell Gates. So essentially this is an upgrade for your gate, and what it does is it gives it a breath weapon as a bound spell to do some damage. This is rather cool. You could see it as when many hordes start knocking on your gate, you wait for the perfect time and then unleash a breath spell to do as much damage as possible. Your enemies would have to start thinking ahead. Does this gate have a Hellgate or not? Can I actually sacrifice these units, or should I actually focus on the walls instead? And now a generic upgrade for singular towers, the Wizard Tower. In the tabletop, this basically made a wizard that was in the tower be a lore master of his chosen lore of magic. However, what could be done here is maybe give the Wizard Tower itself a few bound spells of a chosen lore of magic. Or maybe make the lore of magic completely random so you never know what you'll actually get, including even the spells. maybe in an effort of fairness, instead of making them bound spells, which would make it a rather OP tower, they'd probably have either a few uses to them, maybe 1 or 2 for each spell, or they'd have to actually siphon the winds of magic themselves. Next we have the Tower of Blood upgrade, which is another tower upgrade for the Forces of Destruction. In the tabletop it used to buff up units with Hatred and Frenzy, but I'm imagining here it would probably give a leadership bonus or maybe make them unbreakable, just those in the vicinity of the tower's capture radius. And the last upgrade would be the Sigmarite Shrine for the Forces of Order only. This in the tabletop used to make enemies re-roll their successful ward saves, however, since that really doesn't happen in Total War Warhammer, what it could do is either buff the leadership of your units or reduce the leadership of your enemy. Honestly, I think those things from Blood in the Badlands would actually be quite interesting to implement into the siege system. And there's honestly also loads of stuff that could be created for the other races that don't have anything faction specific towards them by Games Workshop and Creative Assembly. But honestly, the reason why I heavily looked in towards the Blood in the Badlands book is because of its unique siege rules that are unique to Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I feel like these would translate quite well. Maybe some of them would have to have a few fixes, but they would actually translate very well into Total War Warhammer. These, alongside many new maps, would work rather nicely as a siege overhaul. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and let's start a little bit of a discussion. If you have any ideas regarding new mechanics and so on, let's talk about that too, and let's see what we can come up with together as a group. And with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description link below are various social media links such as Facebook, Instagram and Discord, where you can get in contact with the Great Book team and talk to us about pretty much anything Warhammer related, hobby related and so on. Also in the description link below is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Purchasing from this link and also using our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Honestly, your support means the world to us. Honestly, it's amazing that people want to help a small channel grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to our patron Gibraltar LUSC for subscribing to us at our Fane level. Honestly, mate, you're super cool. And a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. Honestly, the channel has been growing like massively lately. I'm not too sure why, but I'm really enjoying being able to talk to Warhammer fans across the globe. Unfortunately, I've not been able to reply to each and every comment lately because there's so many coming in. It's actually becoming a little bit overwhelming. But, you know, join the Discord and so on. I'm a lot easier to access there too. It's honestly amazing to see so many people here. Thank you guys once again, and I shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.